Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. In the late 50s, Hammer breathed fresh life into two monsters from the Golden Age, Dracula and the Frankenstein Monster. Readaptation of the source novels with no legal or story connection to Universal's classics, Curse of Frankenstein and Horror of Dracula were filmed in color, with gothic atmospheres, sexuality, and blood. Both were directed by Terence Fisher and starred Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, forever establishing them as horror stars. As the decade drew to a close, Hammer completed their trifecta by adapting another creature from Universal's horror cycle, and once again with the trio of Fisher, Cushing, and Lee. Released in September of '59, The Mummy adapts its story from the Universal series of the same name. In title, it draws from the Karloff film, but its plot and certain cinematic moments draw from the latter entries, primarily featuring Lon Chaney Jr. under the bandages. Hammer was only able to do so after reaching an agreement with Universal, which also led to 1964's Evil of Frankenstein. Set in the 1890s, the film opens on an archaeological excavation in Egypt led by the father-son team of John and Stephen Banning, played by Peter Cushing and Felix Almaer, respectively. The pair are searching for the tomb of the long-lost Princess Ananka, a high priestess of Karnak that died on a pilgrimage. The tomb is found, but John has had the recent misfortune of breaking his leg. Before he can enter, Stephen is warned by Mehmet Bey, played by George Pestel, a modern-day follower of Karnak, not to enter the tomb, for he shall face the god's wrath. Stephen ignores the warning, enters the tomb, and discovers the riches that Ananka was buried with, including the Scroll of Life. Stephen reads from the scroll, awakening the long-dead mummy Carreras, played by Christopher Lee, high priest of Karnak, who was buried alive for the transgression of attempting to resurrect the princess. Seeing Carreras causes Stephen's mind to snap, and he spends the next several years in an asylum. When it seems he's getting better, Mehmet Bey and Carreras arrive in England and begin to extract vengeance against theirs who dared open the tomb. As mentioned before, the film borrows and combines elements from the Universal series. The main element from Karloff's film is the Hammer spin on the titular character's resurrection. While with Universal, it was what the opening scene was building up to. With Hammer, it's told in two separate scenes. The first shows the build-up and aftermath, with the later one flashing back to show the full resurrection. Each works within the context and tone of their film. While a love story exists in the Karloff film, it's one element that was also recycled in the Carreras series. Its plot relevance outside backstory falls between both parts of Universal's series too. The Banning names are taken from the mummy's hand in the mummy's tomb, with importance shifted slightly. Carreras stalking and killing those who disturbed Ananka's grave one by one comes from the mummy's tomb, although there it's decades later following a first encounter instead of a first several years afterwards. John Banning facing off with Carreras is also borrowed. The film's climax involving the modern-day resurrection of Princess Ananka and Carreras taking her into a swamp comes from the mummy's ghost, but with a happier conclusion. Instead of Maud Anka rapidly aging and sinking into the swamp with her previous life lover, she is saved by John and the local police before filling Carreras with multiple rounds of buckshot. Only then does Carreras sink into the mire. As a result, Hammer only hints that Ananka was reincarnated in modern day. For scenes inside the open tomb, cinematographer Jack Asher wanted to sell the fact that it had been sealed for millennia. To facilitate this, Asher had crew members climb into the catways above the set and spray water before each take. The falling particles would take all the smoke and dust in the air. While not as intense as his turns as Van Helsing or Dr. Frankenstein, Peter Cushing gives an excellent performance. It's more subdued, but in no way phoned in, coming off as an everyman compared to the previous two. His slow unraveling of the Carreras conspiracy and his battles with the bandaged one are highlights for me. Like Lon Chaney Jr. before him, Christopher Lee steps behind the bandages after making his name as another monster. Like with Chaney, it's mostly a thankless role. Lee speaks during the flashbacks, and his voice is monotone, like he's going through the motions. While a flaw in certain contexts, given what Carreras is going through during those rituals, it's an apt choice. Once in the bandages, it's all physical acting and stunt work from Lee. Unlike his turn as the creature, Lee doesn't even have his facial features to emote with. Despite this, he plays the scenes around Maud Anka beautifully, even without words. you can tell exactly what's going through the mummy's head. Lee went through hell making this film, and at times his mummy walk isn't entirely acting. During one scene, a door Lee was supposed to crash through was accidentally bolted shut by a grip. Lee dislocated his shoulder when he broke through the door. The shot is in the final film. Lee was also burned by bullet squibs, threw his back out carrying Fernew during the swamp scene, and also injured his knees and shins filming said scene by bumping into pipes in the studio tank. The supporting cast do an alright job. Felix Almera is good as Stephen Banning, and he and Cushing are convincing as father and son. He also does an excellent scream for the moment he sees Carreras, although he's not as memorable as the original. Yvonne Fernew is fine as Mrs. Banning. She doesn't have a lot to do outside being Ananka's physical reincarnation, but does fine with what little there is. Her vocal tone could have been stronger at times, but there's been worse. George Pastel is a decent human villain as Mehmet Bey. If you've seen the older films, you get the gist. Terence Fisher is once again in the director's chair, making this an unofficial monster trilogy with Lee and Cushing. Like the previous two, he perfectly updates the setting into the world of color film without losing the appeal. The gothic tone Hammer was known for aids in the transition, too. Carreras' flashback scene originally included a shot of his tongue being cut out, but this was cut due to British censors at the time. According to an interview with Peter Cushing on Flesh and Blood, The Hammer of Horror, it was his idea for Banning to thrust the spear through Carreras' chest. Per Cushing, he was inspired by the light beam that passed through the mummy on the pre-release poster. The film met with mixed reviews upon release, with most praise going to the technical elements and most criticism to the plot. Strongest criticism at the time came from one of the credited story developers of the 1932 film, Nina Wilcox Putnam. This disgusting English remake was done without my knowledge or consent, and it has been a terrible shock at the age of 75 to find such a work attributed to me, however wrongly and by indirection. While entitled to her opinion like everyone, to me it feels like Miss Putnam's feelings show a generational divide between filmmakers of 30s horror and 50s horror. One could easily find similar divides between other eras and multiple genres. As for the other criticism, while I see where they are coming from, I feel it's a tad overblown. Other than the love story that lasted millennia aspect, Hammer's take is no deeper than Universal's Carreras films. It just doesn't feel as rushed out. Hammer's The Mummy is a well-made, entertaining film. While it doesn't break fresh ground like its predecessors, it's a love letter to classic horror wrapped up in a best-of package. While they don't get produced often, it shows that they can work when executed well. It's definitely a film that should not be forgotten below the sands of time.